The fog rolled in from the Pacific, a familiar, comforting chill against my cheeks as I walked the hilly streets of San Francisco. At 32, I'd carved out a decent life for myself here, a graphic designer by trade, working mostly from my small apartment in the Mission District. My days were filled with color palettes, font choices, and client meetings, a world away from the gritty reality my dad, Arthur, was facing. He lived in a quiet, unassuming part of the city, a man who had always prided himself on hard work and providing for his family. For over 30 years, he'd been a skilled press operator for a printing company, his hands smudged with ink but his spirit unwavering. Then, the economy shifted, technology advanced, and suddenly his lifelong career evaporated. He was too young to retire comfortably, too old, he felt, to easily adapt to the rapidly changing job market. It had been a heavy blow, stripping him of his routine and, more painfully, a part of his identity. He'd tried applying for everything, from security guard positions to delivery driver roles, but nothing stuck. The desperation in his voice when we spoke on the phone was a new, raw thing that pierced me deeply. That's when he told me about the restaurant job, a cash-in-hand gig at a place called the Golden Spoon, a supposedly high-end establishment that had recently opened in a trendy part of the city. He'd been hired as a general assistant, helping with everything from deliveries to kitchen prep, long hours for what seemed like a decent hourly wage. The catch, he explained hesitantly, was that it was all off the books. No contracts, no pay stubs, just promises. My gut had twisted then, a cold premonition settling in, but Dad had been so relieved, so eager for any work that I bit my tongue. He assured me the owner, a slick-haired man named Mr. Sterling, seemed trustworthy enough. Weeks turned into a month then, too. Dad's initial optimism began to curdle into a quiet anxiety. He'd call, his voice tinged with a weariness that had nothing to do with physical labor. "He said he'll pay me next week, Emma," he'd sigh. "Just a little delay." Next week became the week after. The excuses grew increasingly flimsy: a problem with the bank, an unexpected supplier issue, a sudden drop in business. He was owed about $2,800, a significant sum for him, and for me, given how tight my own budget was helping him out with groceries and utilities. "It's not just me, Em," he'd said one evening, his voice barely a whisper. "The head chef, he's owed over $7,000. Others even more. Sterling just keeps putting us off, avoiding calls." My heart ached for him. My dad, a man who had never asked for anything, was being taken advantage of, his vulnerability exploited by a man who saw human beings as expendable resources. Mr. Sterling became a phantom villain in my mind, a symbol of greed and heartlessness. I felt a hot surge of anger, a desire to protect my father, to right this egregious wrong. This was more than just money, it was about dignity. My first attempts to solve the problem were tentative, born more of desperation than a concrete plan. I tried to talk sense into my dad. "Dad, you need to go to the labor board or small claims court. You can't let him get away with this." He'd shake his head, his eyes haunted. "No proof, Emma, no paper trail, he'll just deny everything, and then I'll definitely never see a cent." He was afraid of burning bridges, of losing the faint hope that Mr. Sterling would eventually make good on his promises. His pragmatism, born of decades of honest labor, was twisted into a paralyzing fear. It was infuriating to witness. Frustrated by his reluctance, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I found the Golden Spoon's phone number online, the website gleaming with polished photos of gourmet dishes and an air of false sophistication. Taking a deep breath, I dialed. Perky voice answered, "The Golden Spoon, how may I help you?" I asked to speak to Mr. Sterling. After a brief wait, a smooth, unctuous voice came on the line. "This is Mr. Sterling. How can I help you, madam?" I introduced myself, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. "Mr. Sterling, my father, Arthur Wilson, has been working for you for several months, and he hasn't received payment for his work." There was a beat of silence, then a low chuckle. "Ah, Arthur. Yes, a fine worker. There's been a slight accounting issue. Nothing to worry about, he'll be paid. Soon." His voice was dripping with condescension. I pressed him, asking for a specific date, a written commitment. He became evasive, then irritable. "Look, I don't discuss my employees' finances with outsiders. Tell your father to speak to me directly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm very busy." He hung up before I could utter another word. My blood boiled. Undeterred, a few days later I decided to visit the restaurant in person. I dressed in what I hoped looked like a business casual outfit, wanting to appear serious and unthreatening, but determined. The Golden Spoon was indeed swanky, with dim lighting, plush seating, and an aroma of expensive food. I asked to speak to Mr. Sterling, explaining I was there on a personal matter. The hostess seemed accustomed to such requests, her polite smile not quite reaching her eyes. After an agonizing wait, Mr. Sterling emerged, his eyes flicking over me with a dismissive air. "Ah, Miss Wilson, still hounding me?" He leaned against the hostess stand, a smirk playing on his lips. "I told you this is a private matter. Your father knows the terms. These things take time." I tried to argue, pointing out the injustice. "He's owed nearly $3,000, Mr. Sterling. He needs that money." He waved a dismissive hand. "And I have a business to run. If he doesn't like the way I do things, he's free to go elsewhere." He then pivoted, addressing the hostess with a loud, theatrical sigh. "Send in the next reservation, please." He was openly dismissing me, making me feel small and insignificant in his grand establishment. It was a calculated power play, and it worked. I left, defeated, the taste of ash in my mouth. The next few weeks were a blur of growing despair. My dad stopped answering Mr. Sterling's calls entirely, a clear sign the man was never going to pay. Dad grew quieter, his shoulders slumped, his eyes distant. He'd lost weight, and his usual vibrant laugh was replaced by a hollow cough. He started talking about selling some of his old tools, things he'd cherished for decades, just to make ends meet. I began dipping into my own savings, sending him money for rent and food, but my emergency fund wasn't limitless. I called a pro bono legal aid clinic, desperate for advice. The lawyer I spoke to was sympathetic but realistic. "Without a written contract, without pay stubs, without any official record of employment, it's incredibly difficult," she explained gently. "You could try small claims, but Mr. Sterling could easily deny he even employed your father. It would be his word against your father's, and with no evidence, it's a very uphill battle. It could drag on for months, costing you more in time and stress than the money is worth, and still you might lose." Her words were a cold shower, washing away my last vestiges of hope for a legal solution. I hung up the phone feeling completely and utterly helpless. My dad was suffering, and I, his only child, couldn't do anything about it. I stared at my computer screen, a half-finished design project mocking me with its vibrant colors. What was the point of creating beauty when the world was so ugly and unfair? I closed my laptop, the click echoing in the sudden silence of my apartment. I felt a crushing weight in my chest, a sense of failure. My dad, who had always been my rock, was crumbling, and I couldn't prop him up. It was my lowest point. I sat there for a long time, the San Francisco fog pressing against my window pane, matching the gloom in my soul. I was angry, not just at Mr. Sterling, but at the system that allowed people like him to prey on honest, hardworking individuals. The helplessness slowly curdled into a hard, cold resolve. If the official channels wouldn't help, if politeness and appeals to decency were useless, then I would have to find another way. A way that hit Mr. Sterling where it hurt, a way that didn't require proof of payment, a way that would expose his deceit for all to see. Revenge, pure and simple, began to bloom in the dark corners of my mind. The idea solidified over a restless week of sleepless nights and furious pacing. My skills as a graphic designer, usually used for corporate branding and marketing campaigns, would be repurposed. Mr. Sterling traded on his restaurant's reputation, its image of upscale dining and professional service. That was his Achilles heel. If I could publicly dismantle that image, expose the rot beneath the polished surface, that would be my justice. He wouldn't just lose money, he'd lose face, something I suspected he valued above all else. I started by gathering information meticulously. I couldn't get other workers to speak to me directly, they were too afraid, just like my dad, but I knew the chef's name my dad had mentioned, the one owed over $7,000. I also knew a few other former employees, first names from what Dad had inadvertently let slip. The most crucial piece of information was the cash-in-hand aspect. This wasn't just about unpaid wages, it was about tax evasion, skirting labor laws, exploiting a vulnerable workforce. That was the real leverage. My first step was to create a series of flyers and posters. I wanted them to look professional, almost like official notices, but with a scathing message. I chose a clean, sans serif font, easy to read, and a color scheme that mimicked the restaurant's own elegant branding, a dark gold and charcoal gray, to make them blend in subtly before the shocking content became clear. The headline screamed, "Warning, unpaid wages at the Golden Spoon." Beneath it, I listed the restaurant's address prominently. Then, in bold letters, "Mr. Sterling, pay your workers." I specifically mentioned my father. Arthur Wilson is owed $2,800 for months of hard work. And then, the damning detail, numerous other chefs and staff, including chef's name, are owed tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid wages, all off the books. I included a subtle yet powerful line. Is this how a reputable establishment operates? Customers deserve to know the truth behind the gilded facade. At the bottom, in smaller print, I added a chilling call to action. Have you been cheated by Mr. Sterling? Share your story at a discreetly created anonymous email address I set up specifically for this purpose. I didn't want to explicitly accuse him of tax fraud, but implying a lack of proper accounting and transparency was enough to raise red flags. My next step was distribution. I knew a few strategic locations would be key. The immediate vicinity of the restaurant was paramount. People walking by, patrons heading in, cars parked nearby, they all needed to see it. But I also considered the broader neighborhood. I purchased an old, cheap bicycle and a large, nondescript backpack. I bought a stack of cheap sticky notes, double-sided tape, and a roll of industrial-strength super glue. This was going to be a guerrilla operation. The night I chose was a Friday peak dinner rush. The San Francisco fog had decided to make a dramatic appearance, swirling around the street lamps, making everything a little mysterious. I dressed in dark, unremarkable clothes, a baseball cap pulled low, and a pair of oversized sunglasses perched on my nose, even in the fading light. I felt like a spy or a vigilante. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. This was it. I started a few blocks away from the Golden Spoon, tacking flyers to public bulletin boards, lampposts, and bus stops. I used the super glue for the lampposts, ensuring they wouldn't be easily ripped down. Each time I pressed a flyer into place, I imagined Mr. Sterling's face, contorted in outrage. I pictured the customers, their eyes widening as they read the damning accusations. I moved methodically, efficiently, working my way towards the restaurant itself. As I approached the block where the Golden Spoon stood, I could see the glow of its neon sign, the murmur of voices and clinking of glasses spilling out from its large windows. A valet was busy parking cars, and a small line of people waited outside for their reservations. This was my moment. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out a stack of the special flyers. I casually walked past the line, pretending to be talking on my phone, and with swift, practiced movements, slipped a flyer under the windshield wipers of every car parked on the street. I even managed to drop one discreetly onto the valet podium when he was momentarily distracted. I continued past the restaurant, circling back around, eyeing it like a predator. Then, the riskiest part of my plan. I walked directly in front of the restaurant, where the line of patrons waited. I wasn't going to hand them out. That would be too confrontational, too easily stopped. Instead, with a casual motion, I accidentally dropped a handful of flyers near the waiting crowd, then quickly bent down to pick them up, feigning clumsiness. As I did, I let a few subtly drift into the crowd where they would be noticed. I saw a young couple pick one up, their faces shifting from curious to concerned as they read. Bingo! My heart pounded with adrenaline. I spent another hour plastering flyers on every available surface within a 2-block radius. I even managed to slip a few under the doors of neighboring businesses, hoping their owners would see them and perhaps share the information. As the night deepened, the fog thickened, and I felt a strange sense of elation mixed with exhaustion. I had done it. I had unleashed my truth. The resolution was swift and incredibly satisfying. By Saturday morning, my phone was buzzing with texts from my dad. He'd seen the flyers. He was shocked, initially fearful of retribution, but then he admitted, "Emma, people are talking about it." A quick search online revealed the chaos. Yelp and Google reviews for the Golden Spoon were plummeting, replaced by 1-star ratings and comments like "unpaid wages," "no thanks," and heard terrible things about the owner. Avoid. A few reviews even directly quoted lines from my flyers. News travels fast in San Francisco, especially when it involves scandal in a high-profile industry. Within days, word spread like wildfire. The anonymous email address I'd set up started receiving messages from other former employees, detailing similar stories of exploitation and non-payment, some for even larger sums than my dad's. They had proof, some of them, old texts or unofficial ledgers, but had been too afraid to come forward alone. Now, they weren't. The cumulative weight of these stories was undeniable. The Golden Spoon's reservations plummeted. The previously bustling restaurant became eerily quiet. I saw a local news report just a week later, featuring a brief segment on rumors of labor disputes at the restaurant, showing a blurry shot of one of my flyers in the background. While they couldn't confirm anything without official statements, the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. The segment ended with a reporter stating that sources suggest local labor boards and even tax authorities may be looking into the establishment's business practices. I never heard from Mr. Sterling directly again, but the silence was deafening. He didn't pay my dad, not a single cent. But that wasn't the point anymore. The restaurant's reputation was in tatters. A few months later, I saw a for lease sign taped to the window of the Golden Spoon. It's gone, another victim of its owner's greed. Mr. Sterling's business, his gilded facade, had crumbled. My dad, while still out his $2,800, was a different man. The weight had lifted from his shoulders. He eventually found a part-time job as a handyman, a less glamorous role, but one where he was treated with respect and, crucially, paid on time. He even started telling people about his experience with Mr. Sterling, no longer shamed by it, but empowered by the truth. He never explicitly asked me if I was behind the flyers, but his knowing smile, whenever the subject of the Golden Spoon came up, was all the confirmation I needed. The justice wasn't financial, it was moral. It was the satisfaction of knowing that the man who had exploited my father and so many others had finally gotten his just desserts, served cold on a platter of his own making. And the best part? He would never know who truly orchestrated his downfall. Just a phantom graphic designer, armed with a laptop, a printer, and a furious daughter's love.